Huggy Wuggy was one of Playtime Co.'s most famous toys and frightening experiments, and in Chapter 1 this character was encountered numerous times, almost killing us. But aside from what we've seen, who is Huggy Wuggy? What was his history up until now, and how will Poppy Playtime move forward considering Huggy's appearance at the end of Chapter 4? Hey everybody, I'm Jeeps, and today we're diving into the chilling story of Huggy Wuggy, one of Playtime Co.'s most iconic and most terrifying experiments. So sit back, relax, and let's begin. Huggy Wuggy was created by Playtime Co. in 1984 and quickly became a huge success across the nation. Many children loved the new toy created by the company, which eventually led to a female counterpart named Kissy Missy being created and released a year later in 1995. Huggy Wuggy was a one-of-a-kind type of toy: blue fur, two googly eyes, a big smile, and long stretchy limbs, thus the name. A song was even made to complement the toy for his advertisements, and we could play it next to Huggy Wuggy in Chapter 1. Of course, Huggy Wuggy wasn't the only toy created by the company to have a theme song, but it was a nice addition for its time. However, as we know, Huggy Wuggy wasn't only made for the entertainment and enjoyment of children. Last video I spoke about Elliot Ludwig's death and the downfall of the company, alongside how Harley Sawyer was responsible for heading the Bigger Bodies Initiative. The Bigger Bodies Initiative proposed life-size giant versions of the non-harmful looking toys, turning them into creatures capable of conducting difficult jobs at the factory, like heavy lifting with minimal effort. The Bigger Bodies Initiative was created in 1990, and Huggy Wuggy was one of the many toys introduced as possible experiments. Though many of the experiments were created for the enjoyment, assistance, and management of the children within the play care, Huggy Wuggy had a different purpose. Huggy Wuggy, also known as Experiment 1170, was specifically designed to be a security system or protocol for the factory, watching visitors and employees as they went by, standing as still as a statue in the middle of one of the many first rooms within the facility. And while Playtime may have thought something like this would go unnoticed, employees eventually did begin to figure something was up, specifically Rowan Stoll, who I've covered numerous times. Rowan Stoll was the head of IT at Playtime Co. and one day noticed Huggy Wuggy's eyes moving. Although there was no evidence to prove this was the case, he submitted his findings to the company, believing that someone could possibly be spying on the people within the company or the children that came into the building. As we know, this wasn't the case, and Rowan Stoll was labeled as a target against the company for being a possible threat to the Bigger Bodies Initiative. That went well for you, right? A few more tapes later, labeling his concerns and rebel actions against the company, he is led down into a storage compartment and killed by another Bigger Bodies experiment named Boxy Boo that had a more sinister purpose, but more on that another time. Now, while Huggy may have been designed for security purposes, he was actually one of the most prized experiments, a part of the Bigger Bodies Initiative, as Huggy Wuggy was the most obedient of all previous designs. Alongside this, because Huggy was meant for security, he was given extra features that allowed him to take down intruders. Features like sharp teeth, incredibly fast speeds, and a dye tamed to human flesh. Not to mention being able to stand still in popular places, staying unnoticed. Now you may be asking why. This may seem like a huge safety risk, and in reality it was. But if Huggy Wuggy was placed in the center of Playtime Co., right in the open, then at least his obedience really stayed true, yeah? However, this didn't last for long, as on June 18th, 1992, Huggy Wuggy managed to escape the Playtime Co. factory through an open bay delivery door, in which multiple staff witnessed and alerted the alarm. Huggy Wuggy was then tracked down through the woods by a numerous amount of security teams and staff, which are seen through a variety of clips on a YouTube video called Restricted Disappearance on Mob Entertainment's YouTube channel, released 2 years ago. And although this was released 2 years ago, there are a variety of documents that actually extend the lore from these clips and show it actually happened, but some of the clips you are about to see are from that same video in the background. Huggy Wuggy is seen hitting a car, killing 5 employees, and is eventually tracked down to a suburban house before being subdued and recontained to bring back into the facility. Now, we don't know who Huggy Wuggy's host is, but there is a large possibility that this house is related to the family or once home of the host used for Huggy Wuggy. Skip forward 3 years to 1995, August 8th, and under the prototype's influence, Huggy Wuggy breaks out and begins attacking Playtime employees around the surface level of the factory, an event we specifically see in the Hour of Joy tape played by Poppy at the end of chapter 3. And if you're not sure that this was the prototype actually influencing Huggy Wuggy, you could take a look at Project Playtime, which was a spin-off game, and you're able to hear the prototype speaking and, giving directions. That's where we believe that came from.
It has to be stopped.
And that's everything we have before Poppy Playtime. But there is slightly more information from Project Playtime, which was Mob Entertainment's Survive the Killer spin-off from the original game. Essentially, the game takes place after the catastrophic events of the Hour of Joy, and Leith Pierre, one of the many executives within the factory, emerges as one of the few known survivors. Driven by his determination to carry on the Bigger Bodies initiative, Leith began sending out resource extraction specialists, basically the people you play as in the game, in groups of 6 at a time into the Playtime Co. factory. After some time, these extractionists stopped getting sent, and the toys were left to survive on their own, most being eaten by the larger Bigger Body initiative creations like Huggy Wuggy. Now here's where we begin with chapter 1. Our player enters the facility in 2005, 10 years after the Hour of Joy, and Huggy Wuggy is the main enemy in this chapter. Upon retrieving the grab pack and using the hand to open the door, we enter through the gate and find Huggy Wuggy standing in the center of the room like we spoke about before. And multiple times throughout the chapter, Huggy Wuggy can be seen stalking us, especially when we aren't looking. This suspense eventually builds up to Huggy confronting us and cornering us, forcing a chase sequence within the vents of the factory. Our player narrowly escapes by grabbing a box with the grad pack we were given and dropping it on top of Huggy as he bursts through the vent, leaving him to fall down hundreds of feet to his death, or so we thought. Because in chapter 2 we find some very interesting details that hint towards Huggy's return. In chapter 2 there are no specific hints towards Huggy Wuggy whatsoever, but there are documents around the facility that may explain details related to his experiment, 1170, but nothing concrete. However, you can find a vent with blue fur and blood leading into it, and after seeing this the community went wild. How could Huggy Wuggy survive such a fall, with or without help? And if he was helped, then who helped him? These are all questions that kind of went unanswered, but we do see more of Huggy Wuggy in later chapters, and we find ourselves asking what his true connection was to the character we play as in the games. In chapter 3 of Poppy Playtime, we make our way down into Playcare, the on-site orphanage, and find ourselves being challenged by the mini smiling critters, Miss Delight, and Catnap, all characters who pose threats to our survival. And while Huggy Wuggy doesn't necessarily appear, after breathing in poppy gas that leads to hallucinations, a nightmare version of Huggy Wuggy appears from the screen, leading to a momentary chase sequence before we get caught and suddenly wake up in the middle of the room. Now this is the only time we actually get anything related to Huggy Wuggy in this chapter, but I've spoken about Huggy's relation to our character before in another video, and this chapter shows a lot about the possible connections between the two. But the biggest mysteries a part of Huggy Wuggy's story arrive in chapter 4 of the game. Chapter 4 is the newest chapter of Poppy Playtime and was released a few months ago around the beginning of 2025. This involved many new characters like Doey, Pianosaurus for like 10 seconds, and other enemies we've seen in the past. But hey, let's skip the entire chapter and look at what's important. The ending. At the end of chapter 4, we find ourselves wandering through the most secure part of the Playtime Go factory, the poppy flower fields, possibly the base ground for where everything started in the beginning of the storyline. Leith Pierre begins talking through a television after we place a VHS tape into it, which then alerts some type of security protocol, turning on the poppy gas dispensers, and Huggy Wuggy begins walking out of the smoke with some visible appearance changes, which I was kind of wowed by when I saw them. As you can see, Huggy Wuggy is missing his left arm and has numerous damages like exposed organs and missing fur, alongside possibly missing a limb. To add on to this, he's also clearly having difficulty walking, so his legs were most likely heavily damaged in the fall as well. I don't know what they made his character out of, but this guy is literally made of steel, because nobody should be able to survive a 1,000-foot fall into the depths of this factory. And if you saw him hit that pipe in chapter 1, he dropped blood. So How did he survive this fall? I don't know, but he probably got some outside help. Alongside his injuries, you could see some attempts to nurture himself. So like I said, there is a possibility he either got help from another entity or continued the hunt immediately after the fall for us. Overall, Huggy has been a small but massive part of the lore difference in the timeline of Poppy playtime, and I can't wait to see what's coming, especially how this will impact the possible final chapter of the game. As always, I'm Jeeps. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know your theories down below. If you enjoyed this video, consider watching this one right here, and I'll see you in the next video.